Welcome to the Pivot, and this time we've got Nico Dekens, or the Dutch OSINT guy. Nico, thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. It's fantastic to have you in the studio with us today. How are you? You're doing okay? I know it's a bit of a hot weather situation right now.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's an honor. And yes, we are all slowly melting here in Europe. It's for Europe standards, it's super hot. Yeah,
It is. It's unusually hot, but hey, you know what? Any excuse for some ice cream, right? That's what I always
yeah,
say.
exactly.
So what's keeping you up at night these days, Nico? What makes the Dutch OSINT guy tick? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Well, currently, I think most of my time goes into refining my courses that I've written for SANS. I'm doing a lot of investigations regarding the Ukraine, but I do that mostly, let's say, not publicly. That's my golden rule. When I do investigations, I will never do investigations publicly. That's just something I don't do. Has a little bit to do with my background in Dutch government, I guess. So I don't think that even though things are open source intelligence, it should not always be exposed to the open. Other than that, I'm just always looking for new ways or more efficient ways to perform open source intelligence. So it could be building my own little Python script, could be looking at someone else's script and see if I can grab pieces from it and then maybe work with it, or for example, play around with Multigo again and see if I can find a more efficient way to build a transform or to automate that, and just to save me time. I think nowadays that's probably my biggest priority, because I've got so much to do that everything that I can make more efficient, I will not hesitate to take time to make things more efficient.
Mm. Yeah, I think this is really something in investigations as well, right? So um, I think Multigo is a pretty good tool when it comes to making your life easier and making your processes more efficient. But I think what I've noticed, especially in the recent past, and talking to a lot of even on the especially on the podcast, a lot of
Mhm.
the real life investigators, everyone's talking about scripting and making these little bits of code that makes life easy. It's becoming quite a, or maybe I'm just noticing it now, but I think it's becoming quite a trend. Everyone's getting into those little snippets to grab lots of code from somewhere, or automate something somewhere else, grab a little bit more data that you didn't maybe see before.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it also has to do with the scalability of the internet nowadays. I think 10, 12, 15 years ago, things were more easy to grab or collect at scale because the information load was not that huge. And now the information load is everywhere and anywhere. So you need to, or at least scale up. And also, I think when certain open source intelligence investigators or analysts reach a certain knowledge level, they become aware of the fact that they can be more efficient once they understand how to program or automate certain repetitive tasks. And this is where I think by default, most open source intelligence investigators are not developers or programmers, which I think is a good way to separate those worlds. I think I would never have the ambition to be a developer, but I think it's important for me to know and understand and how to read someone else's code, especially if I'm going to use someone else's code, because there may be malicious content in there. There may be things that are communicating with servers that I do not feel comfortable with. So those are things that, it's hard. For example, in my class, we teach you how to program to some extent, but I cannot teach you how to program in 6 days. I can give you the fundamentals. I can give you the basics. And even if I would give you a 2 weeks course on how to Python program, then still it will be pretty challenging to put it to practice, because you need to have a goal. And if you don't have a goal, it's pretty hard to get started with programming something for a specific need. But yeah, hey, it's fun. It also gives you a good way to look at a different perspective or angle, because in the end, everything that happens on the internet is pieces of code that are running and executing certain commands. If you understand those, you can see, well, quote unquote, the matrix a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, no, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the biggest advantages of developing your own scripts or little bits of code is you also start to think about the process.
Yeah.
You know, and you think about, okay, so I got this, what can I do with the result of that? Is there something I'm actually missing in my investigation as well? And I think that's actually helped lots of different people make more cohesive and more analytical investigations as well.
Yeah. Also, when I look at, for example, when I run a transform in Maltego, for example, it gives me simply more time to do the, coming back to the comment that you just made, to do the proper analysis. So when I run, for example, a social net transform looking for social media accounts in Maltego, it will spit out probably 10, 12, if not 50 user accounts that are attached with that same username or email address. Of course, I can do that manually, but that would probably take me half a day or an entire day to collect all the information. Now, the collection part is done for me in, well, probably under a minute.
Yeah.
And now the analysis part starts. And that's what I think is still the most important part of open source intelligence, the analysis part. The collection part is, on average, fairly easy. It's just collecting the information without giving it any meaning or any processing or any shedding light over your results. And now you can really start digging. Hey, what does this mean to my research question? Does it give me an answer? Does it give me new locations to pivot to other locations? So I think that's such an undervalued piece within OSINT, is to really look at the information. People, or at least how I look at it, when I look at, for example, my Twitter timeline, and of course I follow all kinds of people all around the world that are knee deep into online investigative journalism or open source intelligence, all they do is hoard all the data, or at least that's what I'm seeing them do publicly. But I rarely see people really give a good, thorough analysis breakdown of, hey, this is what it means. This is what it means to me in my investigation. This is the answer that I found based upon the collection of all this data. That's something that sometimes kind of annoys me. It's fairly easy to find a picture that where someone is being shot or something horrific. But what does it mean? What does this picture mean? Where does it come from? How reliable is that information? Can you check it through other sources? All those little steps.
The proper intelligence cycle, right? I think.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. I think it's fun to have lots of results. It's like seeing those GitHub pages with tons and tons of entries as to where you can get different things, and someone makes a script to hit all of these APIs with one request, and you're like, okay, I now have a sea of information.
Yeah, and now what? Yeah. I think that's a problem, because I think a lot of people will now say, hey, I've collected everything. Yeah, but everything is nothing if you don't know what you're looking for. If you're not capable of refining those results and, let's say, putting aside the noise or the false positives, or pointing out information gaps, those dark spots or blind spots in your information, or being able to point out, hey, here we have a pivot point. We could do a deeper dive here to potentially find more corroborating data. That's something that I would really like to see a little bit more from people who are, let's say, doing those threads of investigations on Twitter. Mostly what you see them is, I don't see them. They just say, hey, I found this, then I found this, then I found this. Yeah, cool. But what does it mean? Where's the information coming from? What made you decide to look there and not there? Those decisions, those thought processes are key, because if you need to revisit that same thread a month from now and someone asks you, hey, why did you go left there and not right? You probably will not be able to reproduce that anymore because you did not point it out when you started out.
No,
So,
absolutely. That
yeah.
makes sense. But you mentioned a very interesting point as well, and I think it's very relevant now because technology and the internet, it's evolving at a pretty exponential rate. What was it like running these kind of investigations 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago?
Um, I'd like to say it was a little bit more easy, but honestly, let's say criminals still make mistakes, or let's say bad people still make mistakes. Um, I think what made it a little bit more easy for me when I was at that point doing covert and clandestine operations at the Dutch law enforcement is that there was not that much multimedia, so pictures and videos. So it was more plain text. Um, it was IRC chat channels. It was the beginning of Facebook. It was basically the beginning of social media,
Mm,
where um, most of the times it was still forums and that kind of, and plain text is just way easy, or at least way more easy to sort through and scrape through and grab through and find information in a more fast and efficient way than, let's say, 2.5 hours of video footage. That's a different challenge. So when people ask me that question that you just asked me 10, maybe 20 years ago, um, it was a little bit more easy. But on the other hand, the computers weren't that powerful yet, or the technology was also not that evolved. So it implied me doing a lot of manual work to sort and refine the data that I collected until I could do a proper analysis on it. So in essence, it's still the same. I think nowadays you just need more computing power and probably more, um, let's say, algorithms or scripts that can do certain calculations for you, just simply again to save you time. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I can't obviously disagree with anything you said. I think it's very interesting to see, especially because you mentioned social media, just the plethora of different social media outlets that are there right now, that exist
Yeah.
right now, and the fact that even specific regions have, their own kind of social media. That's
Yeah.
quite a complexity to the investigation, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think for now, for me, one of the biggest challenges is that more and more social media is behind, let's say, mobile only
Hmm.
platforms. So that makes it a little bit more challenging because certain platforms, for example, a platform like Snapchat, even if you use a virtual machine, a virtualized Android version, you still cannot really get it to work as properly as you can get it to work on, let's say, an iPhone or an Android phone, an actual physical device. And my anticipation for the near future, when we are going deeper and deeper into the metaverse, that would be a new challenge for open source intelligence, because how anonymous can I be as an investigator in the metaverse? Will they allow me to set up a sock puppet account? And if so, can I set up a sock puppet account in the metaverse with making use of a, let's say, a burner phone or a burner email account? That will become a new challenge. That is something that I'm really looking into. It also gives me an excuse to buy the cool stuff for the metaverse, but
Get an
but
Oculus
that's, yeah,
headset.
yeah. Just gives me a good reason to tell the people here at home, hey, I really need to buy cool stuff. And but yeah, that are things that well, are new challenges. Hey, but life isn't fun if we don't have challenges every now and then, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the pure curiosity of it as well. I mean, imagine having to go through the trouble of keeping a sock puppet account alive and moving in the metaverse.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be, yeah, and that's really challenging because now I'm keeping multiple sock puppets accounts alive, which I can do semi-automated, but I don't know if I can achieve the same goal with a sock puppet in the metaverse as well. Or is that really a manual process? Should I put on those goggles and start walking around in a virtual world, let's say a couple of minutes every day, just to make that sock puppet account look possible? I honestly, I don't have the answers yet. I wish, but those are those challenges that we need to cope and deal with.
I mean, I'm really curious. I mean, could you imagine a world where we have a ton of OSINT investigators with their headsets on, just
Yeah.
walking their sock puppet accounts for a couple minutes a day? I think that would be pretty
Yeah.
intense.
Yeah, but I do anticipate on it that that will happen somewhere between now and, let's say, 15 years, that will be normal. Also, when you look at the new Web 3.0, that's also for me a bigger challenge because things become more and more decentralized, which makes it harder to find information. Also makes it harder for governments to take down certain information because it's censor resistant. And we all know when it comes to, let's say, child abuse content or terrorism related content, every now and then we want to take something down just because it's so horrific or so disturbing or so life threatening that it
Mhm.
needs to be taken down. But with decentralized platforms, we have a new challenge. We may be able to find it from an OSINT perspective, but what now? Can we do something about it? Can we do OSINT for good? I don't know. I don't know yet.
Have you done any investigations that revolve around the DAO and the decentralized web?
Yeah. Of course, yeah. I spent a lot of time, particularly looking into those harder, let's say, to investigate platforms, just because I like that challenge. But also, I like to understand how those platforms work. What can I find? What can I not find? For example, I spend a lot of time on a platform called minds.com. I look a lot also on Telegram, which is also somewhat decentralized or at least censor resistant. um, I'm trying to look into platforms that people can self-host, so Rocket Chat kind of platforms. Um, yeah, and I can only anticipate now, looking at the NFT sphere, that people are setting up virtual worlds with virtual avatars. Yeah, things will become challenging. But again, um, every it seems to me that every 7 to 8 years we have a, let's say, somewhat huger shift in the landscape, and we just simply need to adopt and adapt those new changes. We all think, oh, I think most of the people that are listening to this recording may remember that Facebook had a graph search and they killed it overnight, which made a lot of investigators panic. But now, a couple of years later, we all adopted and adapted. And I think most of us are still capable of finding, well, almost the same content that we could back then.
Yeah, I think physiologically we're the most adaptable beings, so I don't see why we can't adapt to searching or finding more resources to do our investigations. I do. I mean, I agree, of course, that there's going to be much more complexity when it comes to these kind of investigations. I was asked just the other day, like how can we conduct investigations on the NFC on the NFT sphere? Like, can we go through OpenSea? Can we go through MetaMask and see what's happening there? What about
Yeah.
these new wallets that are coming out? These privacy coins and the privacy wallets, and there's a lot out there. But I think given just given as you said the adoption rate and the adaptability, I think there may be some tools out there that we can use,
Yeah.
but how effective are those tools going to be is one of my questions at this point.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah, and also I also I still believe that criminals will make mistakes always.
Mhm.
That's I've been in law enforcement for 25 years, and I think most criminals are being caught just by making that one little mistake that I didn't think of, or just that little slip of tongue or something like that. That will always happen. That's just human behavior. So in the end, when it comes to computers, there's always people behind computers. If it's a mobile device, if it's a laptop or the metaverse, there's always people operating it. And of course,
Mhm.
those devices will become quote unquote smarter because of machine learning and AI. But in the end, it's still a human turning on the power button and turning it off by the end of the day and operating it. So, and they will make mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess one of the most amusing things for me to find when we do these investigations is when you look at passwords, it's the easiest thing to come across when someone's been reusing their passwords.
Yeah.
Right? The adapt or the, let's say, adaptation of the password. You can always link it back to someone. It's one of the fun things to look at. But let's talk about tools. I mean, you must be, over the years, have gathered lots of different methods and varieties to your investigations as well. What are some of the tools you use? I mean, niche tools as well, if you can talk about it.
Honestly, I don't use that many tools. I think my number one tool that I use is Maltego, and then particularly with SocialNet by ShadowDragon. I run some of my own monitoring, so based upon RSS Hub, which is basically a open source GitHub project that allows you to monitor based upon RSS feeds, as well as monitor Facebook and Twitter feeds. I use Cirx or Cirx, however you would like to call it. That's, let's say, your own search engine, which you can also plug into your own data sources a lot. I'm the hoarder of all data, along with some friends. So I collect all kinds of breaches. So I have my own database of breaches. But I don't have, let's say, a bundle of tools. Of course, I like to use, for example, Nexus Explorer by OSINT Combine, but it really depends on what kind of question I'm going to use. Sometimes these tools simply speed up my process. It's just a simple example. I recently had a case where there was a presumed school shooting where someone asked me to investigate that. I could have done that manually, but it probably would have taken me at least 5 days to collect all the data, and then at least another 5 days to sort through that data, to give it some meaning, to find answers. When I did that through, in this case, a combination of Maltego and some manual searching, I was done, let's say, in under 2.5 hours, with a conclusion, with a written report, with everything. And that's, for me, just shows me the power of that. Nowadays, when you need to collect data at scale and you need to have an answer fast, sometimes just simply more efficient as well as cost efficient to use certain automated tools. I could have done exactly the same 100% manually with my own scripts or with my own Python scripts, but it just would have taken way longer. So that really depends. So when I look at my tool set, screenshotting tools, I use them every day. I like to use Snagit. Why? Because it gives me the opportunity to blur and annotate on the picture immediately.
Yeah.
I like to use certain plugins like search by image. Invid is one I look. Automatic translating tools, which we shouldn't rely upon because online translating tools are not that good, but at least it gives you a good glance upon. But other than that, I don't really use that many tools. I think, and that's something that I always preach, the biggest tool that I use is my brain. Just critical thinking, doubting everything, assuming nothing, checking everything. That's my standard operating procedure.
That's so cool, man.
Yeah. I don't know if that was the answer that you're looking for, but I'm not a tool guy. I use tools, yes. This morning I used a YouTube downloading tool, a YT-DLP, which is basically the revamped version of the YouTube DL GitHub script that's available. Why? Because I needed to extract all the comments from a video where presumed child abuse was going on. So, of course, I could do that manually, looking in the source code and then dragging and dropping and selecting all the text. No, I could also fire up a script, point it to that video, and 2 seconds later, boom, I have a JSON file with all the comments. And now all I need to do is, for example, with jQuery, go through all those comments and see if I can find the keywords of interest. So
Mhm.
it really depends. I think for me the most important part is nowadays is that I know what tools I can use for certain tasks. So I would like to always see I have a digital toolbox that's really filled with tools and scripts and methodologies and techniques, and I cherry pick those based upon my case, and then I use them.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty amazing. I think having that, let's say that tool bag with your tools is, with well, with the
Yeah.
hammer and the chisel and all of and all of your other tools, I think is definitely something useful. Um, the reason I'm curious about this is a lot of operators have different ways of going about their work, right? Some of them are very much tool based. They have literally, like you said, scripts of where to start, where to go. They have a template. They have you know a process map of, okay, I will use this tool for this, I will use this tool for that. Obviously some things are specific, like downloading a YouTube video and translating that content. There are specific things. um, have you seen people who actually get stuck using specific tools and then get, let's say, held back by the hindrance of using those tools only?
Yeah, most definitely. I think it's always a good thing to have, let's say, standard operating procedures and methodologies to do certain tasks that you have done, let's say, previously. But what I've seen that investigators do is that they stare themselves blind on that one tool, and every tool has its limitations. Every tool has limitations. And if you're not capable of seeing those limitations and being able to figure out how to deal with those limitations, your standard operating procedure is basically shutting down your own business or shutting down your own investigation. Because, and I hate to say that, you thinking out of the box, that's that popular term, but that's something that within OSINT you should always be capable of doing. Because if you only stick to those rigid standard, let's say, flowcharts or those decision trees, you will overlook certain things. This
Mhm.
is why I don't really like those decision trees, because there's never an option what if. So is Brad now in Germany? Yes or no? But maybe there's something in between.
Yeah.
Maybe he was there this morning, but now he's in the Netherlands. And of course, you could answer that with no, but there's always that little question mark in between every answer that it could be yes or no. And I think I know when I look at my background in the Dutch government, most governments, I think, would like to use flowcharts, especially for the people who don't do, let's say, open source intelligence 24/7, 365.
Mhm.
They need to have those manuals, those playbooks. Yeah, of course, those are good, but don't stare yourselves blind on playbooks. If you only look at the playbook because that's the only path you can take, you're doing your investigation short, period. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to look at it, isn't it? I think not everything is so binary in terms of decision making. Everything has a certain. I just don't. The word escapes me right now. Conditions.
Yeah. Well,
Everything has a condition.
just look at life. There's not a single day in your life that's exactly the same as the day before. So the same counts for all your investigations. There's not a single investigation that will be exactly the same as a previous investigation. Of course, there will be overlap. There could be 95% overlap, but that 5% is different from the previous one. So you should always be able to at least be on the lookout for that 5% difference, because that could mean a whole lot as a breakthrough in your investigation.
No, absolutely. That's. Hey, I guess that's exactly what you said. It's out of the box thinking, right?
Yeah, and I so hate those, let's say, those turbo slang kind of phrases.
Yeah. I think that's a really cool outlook on actually the needs of not just the robotic, let's say, binary thinking of how to go around with investigations. And I think there's, as you said, a lot of conditions, and life just flows differently, right?
Yeah.
But let's take a bird's eye view of what's happening, maybe like a satellite view of what's happening right now as well. The world right now, as we know it, is there's places that are going through some drastic changes. There's places that are going through some really sad times as well.
Yeah.
As an investigator, what if I don't even know how to ask you this, but what are your biggest concerns or worries right now in terms of what you do and how all of this is affecting your work? Now, for example, um, something very interesting that I found at, that I found in so I live in Germany, so near one of the most central cities, obviously, and at the central station of the city, so Munich Central Station, we there were boards, so literally signage, talking about women being uh, let's speak openly, women being snatched up for sexual trafficking,
Hmm.
children being affected by trafficking. So be on the lookout for any odd activity.
Yeah.
you know and there was a resurgence of law enforcement presence during this time as well. So this is at the very beginning of some of the victims of the current tragedy in Ukraine, moving over to seek asylum, obviously in a safer country.
Yeah.
But there was also this presence of imminent danger that something might happen when they get to ground here, that there might be other perpetrators looking for other malicious activities, or running other malicious activities that's going to affect these people.
Yeah.
So I think, like, I was certainly taken aback by this, and I think that this is definitely one of these other concerns.
Yeah. Well, when I look at the last, let's say, 3 years, just let's say the starting of the pandemic, the starting of the war in the Ukraine, uh, my biggest worry is that the world is becoming so polarized.
Hmm.
People who used to be friends now starting to become enemies. People who trusted in their governments now have strong doubts about their governments based upon um, 9 out of 10 times um, fake information or disinformation. Um, I think that social media in general um, could rather be renamed and revamped to a social media, because there's nothing social about it anymore. Most of these platforms are more about people showing off how good they are and putting other people down, or becoming victim platforms. Well, like you just told, young women becoming victims of certain predators. For example, I have young children. They play Roblox. Roblox is a platform where, well, when you spend, let's say, longer than half an hour in it, from an open source intelligence perspective, you will see that more than half of the platform um, is being used by people who are preying on younger children. Same counts for TikTok. And we're not even talking about TikTok as a platform itself being used for spying by a nation state, mostly. I think that has been proven now, most by a lot of academic researchers. And I think that's my biggest worry, that people think or thought that with the world becoming more interconnected with the internet, it should have become a more safe place or a more safe haven. But things are really going sideways. I spend a lot of time in the UK, in London, and London is one of the cities that has by far the most surveillance cameras around the world in the city center. But still, people get murdered in broad daylight. People get robbed. Young women get harassed. Um, and the interesting thing is, I noticed an incident recently on the news there, where two young women were being harassed by a very large group of young guys. But there were at least, let's say, 2 times more people standing by doing nothing and putting it on Snapchat or TikToking it. But no one was doing anything. And I think that has become my biggest worry, that people are so passive and so scared or so numb that they only film, but they don't act anymore. And that's also when we talk about demonstrations or rallies. Of course, these past 2 years, we've seen more demonstrations and rallies than we have seen, let's say, in the last 2 decades. Because I think most of us remember rallies and demonstrations from the Cold War period. But nowadays, people just rally and demonstrate on social media because it's so easy to sit behind a keyboard and see and say whatever you want to say without thinking of the consequences. People can get really hurt by words, and people forget that. So, yeah, when you ask me, is the world becoming a better place or a nicer place and safer place with all the technology that we now have in place? I don't think so. I really don't think so.
So to continue on what you mentioned, I think there's a lot of truth to this. Even if you look at places like Snapchat, Reddit, a lot of these social media outlets, there's a lot of horrific things you can see quite publicly as well. Not just with what you mentioned, like the harassment and even like watching how people get stabbed in broad daylight. But you can even find footage of what's happening in certain war zones.
Yeah.
Quite openly. So it's also, I mean, I think it's really a danger to the younger generation when they're just exposed to all this. It's madness, really.
Well, also from a privacy perspective, yes, I'm that old. I'm from the age where when I went out with my friends when I was younger, and let's say we had a couple of drinks, you could, let's say, walk around the street being a little bit drunk or tipsy without being filmed and being put on social media and made fun of. And nowadays, I think the impact for the younger generation is every step they take outside, they are anticipating on being exposed online, and that could really stick to you for the rest of your life. Because if they're now in school but they are going to apply for a job, someone could look up their TikTok from when they were 7 or 8 years old and doing some crazy stuff that kids do. But I'm from the age I could do crazy stuff and it would never end up on the internet because the internet was not that popular or not invented yet. So I think that's a huge change. But also, when you talked about the war, I recently saw some major news outlets doing investigations on, let's say, foreign fighters joining the Ukrainians to help them.
Mm-hmm.
But what worried me is there was absolutely no need to figure out where those foreign fighters were at that moment in time. So if you from a news outlet perspective, if you're going to tell the world, hey, we found 3 foreign fighters, one from the Netherlands, one from Germany, one from the UK, they teamed up and now they are exactly at these coordinates, and you're putting that online, well, maybe the Russians now think, let's put a drone on those coordinates and bomb them. So people don't think about the risks. Or even if you find a Russian POW that's being caught, why do you have a need to show that person's face? It's still a person. I know they do horrific things, but people play internet judge all the time, and they do not always think about the longer term consequences and what it could mean.
Yeah, I think that's becoming a very popular thing as well, isn't it? To just sit and judge what's going on when you have no clue of the consequences of what that person that you may be seeing on your screen is suffering. Okay, maybe it's not something new, but I think what I'm trying to say is, especially when it comes to social media, now that exposure is so much higher, the fallback or the blowback from all of this is also very high, because what, someone's going to see your name popping up on a recording, or your alias popping up on a recording where you're talking, let's say.
And what if you're wrong?
Yeah.
I've seen cases in the Netherlands where some young guys were caught up in a fight, and people thought they found one of the guys, so they doxed that person. So doxing being exposing, let's say, someone's entire life and credentials and everything where they live. And that guy was actually visited at his home, beat up. His house was set on fire, but he was innocent. He had nothing to do with it. He just looked like the guy. And that's not the first time that these things happen. I've seen during the Charlottesville riots in the United States, people being pointed out for being part of far right-wing demonstrations, which they just looked like the guy or girl. And people just being those internet sleuths trying to find stuff out, and they are exposing people without thinking, hey, this could have real consequences because people may be angry with them. Now you've put their address online or their phone number, and people will actually visit that house and can do horrific things. And that's something that I think, especially professionals like myself and you and other people and journalists, we have a role to prevent from doing that. But I see journalists doing this, and I'm like, no, bringing the news is not bringing risks to people. You should be aware of that you are now exposing people and posing a real threat to their lives just because you want a scoop. It's not about a scoop. It's about actually thinking of what could be the consequences of putting someone's name or picture or photo online or someone's address. Just because you are capable of finding it doesn't always mean that you should post it online. This is, again, where we started off. This is why I never post anything about any investigation that I do on my socials. There's no need for me to do that. It's between me and the client, or between me and my investigation. It's not meant to be public.
No, absolutely, and exactly what you're describing happened to the first victim of the the first suspect victim of the Boston Marathon bombing. They didn't find the suspect. No, they found some kid, literally, who looks like the guy who dropped the bag and walked off, and yeah, he got beat up. That's absolutely not what investigations are all about, is it?
No, it's about ethics, and it's about doing the good thing. It's about thinking about the consequences and fact checking and double checking and triple checking that if your findings are correct. And even then, having that strong doubt that what if new information comes in a day from now or a week from now? Would that totally change my outcome? Is there a need to put it publicly online? Or should I keep it to myself or inform the proper authorities without? It's not about the likes. It's not about thumbs up. It's that should never be the goal when you do investigations.
Yeah, I mean, it's also power play, though, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. Some people are only in for it for the kudos and for the likes.
Yeah, it's hashtag movements, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So on my LinkedIn, I have a headline that says I'm trying to save the world, right? I'd like to think that I'm doing this in a little bit, at least by empowering people with the tools to do these investigations, to enhance their capabilities, reduce the time they spend on manual work. I do know that you have saved lives, right? You've contributed to this time and time again. How does that make you feel?
That's a good question. That's a hard question. How does it make me feel? For me, it feels like doing what I'm supposed to do. I've my entire working life at the government and now as a private consultant is all about trying to make the world a little bit of a safer place. And if I can contribute to that with my knowledge and my skill set in helping someone stay safe or saving someone's life, which always feels kind of awkward that I've achieved those goals, I would never hesitate to do that. I will work tirelessly to save your life or your family's life if I know that I'm capable of doing that at this moment in time. it made me proud. It made me happy. It made me feel good in a way that I could say, hey, there were certain cases where we prevented certain terrorist attacks in Europe or all around the world, where we helped people flee from countries that were really scared about their lives or their families. So yeah, if I can do that, I will never hesitate to do that. And if I can do that with the tools and power and my network of friends, I will always do that, and I will always continue doing that, because I think that's my goal in life, to keeping people safe and making the world a safer place. And I know it's just I'm just one little pine in the entire play field, but hey, I'm doing whatever I can. That's and all these times that I did this, it was never the goal to be to tap myself on the shoulder and say, hey, this is what I did. No, that's just, I got these cases in my lap, or I was watching the news and I was like, hey, I can do something about this, or at least I can try to do something about this. Or there was an Amber Alert where a young kid was kidnapped, and I was like, hey, from an OSINT perspective, I can see certain pivot points here. Let me try and fire up my laptop. And well, the girl was found. Those examples, it's not about me, Nico Dekens, being so super awesome. No, it's about me putting my skills to practice to help others and to keep them safe, or keep them out of the hands of bad people with bad intentions.
Have you heard of the Japanese word, or maybe I would say term, of ikigai?
No, please tell me, what's that?
That's pretty much the embodiment of what you've just been describing. So it's about using your skills to drive your passion to do a specific, thing or an action. So, for example, the samurai, or for example, even if you go really even deeper, it's the craftsmen who were designing the katanas, so the swords, and there was a passion for the craft and a passion for what you do to enhance your skills, to further your passion for what you do, to make sure that the product is of some sort of perfection. So I was just saying that I think what you've just been describing very much is the almost the embodiment of the word ikigai in Japanese. So
Well,
that's
I
pretty
learned
cool.
something new today. Yeah, and I think I can somewhat agree, because for me, being in this OSINT sphere, or in this online investigator sphere, for me, it doesn't feel like work. It's literally my passion. This is what I do. This is what I've been doing for decades. So, of course, I need to make a living because I run my own company nowadays. But my main goal is that I do what I love to do, and that's what makes it so much fun. And there's always something to learn, and this is why I like open source intelligence so much, because there's every day you can learn something new. I just learned about ikigai, so now let me start looking up that and see if I can learn more about it. Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah, no, I just looked it up as well. So it's uh living to your sense of purpose.
Yeah, well, I can agree. I can agree with that. Yeah, that's yeah, that would be, let's say, my number one life goal: taking care of people, or taking care of people who need help.
No, that's amazing. So to sort of round that off, I normally like to ask this question of our guests, and I think it's important because a lot of people want to start somewhere, but they don't know where to start, right? So one is, if someone wanted to do what you do, where would they start? And second,
Hmm.
what are the three things you'd say to someone getting into this sort of world?
Okay, good question. So where would I start? I would start by looking at the people who are in the community that have been doing this for, let's say, a couple of years. Just start following them on Twitter, maybe on Instagram, and just see what they are doing. Read up on their blogs. For example, I'm part of OSINT Curious, so start reading on those blogs. Maybe start looking at OSINT Dojo. Maybe start looking at the Pivot recordings and start learning from there. That could be a great starting point to see if open source intelligence is something for you or online investigation is something for you. When it comes to the free things, I think the most important thing that I always had was tenacity. Having that drive to never stop, always to see if there's just that one little nugget that you can find. I think the second one is stay humble and communicate with others. Every time when I think I know something, I come across someone else that knows way more about it. So I learn from others every day, all day. When I look at, for example, my former colleagues at law enforcement, I'm in close contact with most of them. We have a small little group where we chat together. And every week I get this little insight, this little nugget that I learn from. So being part of the community again, or being part of a more close community, can really help you move forward. And I think my biggest lesson from the last, let's say, 10 years is that you need to reserve some time for yourself every week to what I like to call nerd days, never-ending research and development days, NERD, is to install that little script. See, am I capable of installing it? And if so, what can it do? To read up on the blog, just to stay informed. So you need to reserve time. So it's not only about investigation. It's time to invest in yourself. Maybe read a book on open source intelligence. Maybe read a blog. Maybe go to a conference. Those things. Those 3 things for me are, I think, nowadays the most important parts. Tenacity, being part of the community, communicating with the community, staying humble, and taking the time to stay, let's say, on top of the food chain, to read up on everything.
Those are some pretty good tips. I think, look, getting into the Intel world, and especially, diving into how to run investigations. I wish I had found the OSINT Curious project earlier, or the SANS project earlier, like OSINT Dojo. I really wish I found them earlier, but I was using, different methods of learning, which actually comes all the way down to what you mentioned: is talk to people, communicate, be humble. It's amazing what people would be, willing to share with you if you only ask them.
Yeah,
communicate.
Fully agree. Ask questions, and there are no stupid questions.
Exactly. I do know that you've, on your blog, you've touched on something called Vicarious Trauma. Would you share some of that with me? Because I'm not. This is not something I've really dipped into too much.
Yeah. So vicarious trauma is basically trauma that you can get from looking at horrific things, or listening or watching horrific things. When I was in law enforcement, I spent almost 10 years doing counterterrorism work. So it was during the high rise of the Islamic State. So while others were eating their lunch, I was eating my lunch when people were being decapitated, murdered, set on fire. And that's not normal. So watching those pieces of footage, and if you now look at, for example, what the footage that has emerged from the Ukraine, we can see pretty horrific content.
Pretty brutal stuff.
Yeah. And you should never forget that could stick to you. That could really, really traumatize you. That's called vicarious trauma. So it's indirect trauma. So you're not directly there witnessing it, but still the impact of looking at could really impact you. This is why I wrote that blog. It's all about giving you some tips how to prevent from getting the trauma. So, for example, if you're watching footage, you can turn off the audio, because that will really help you from not getting the impact. We all know, for example, if you watch a horror movie, if you turn off the audio, it's actually pretty funny to watch a horror movie. But if you turn on the audio again, it becomes really scary. Same counts for people being martyred or something like that. Sometimes you may want to take a step away every now and then. Just don't sit behind your computer 8 hours, 10 hours a day. Just take a walk outside. See that there are normal things going on. Talk to people. I think, and talk about your investigation. Talk about the troubles you're having. Talk about the issues you're having. Maybe you can't get any sleep just because you're investigating. I've had periods when I had really hard times getting some rest just because my mind was always on high alert by doing the work that I do. So vicarious trauma is real, and it should never be underestimated. And especially if you don't have any professional guidance. I think most Western governments nowadays will have mental health checkups every now and then. When I was in government, every X months we had mental health checkups. Even though if you would say, hey, I'm perfectly fine, they still said, hey, you need to go and talk to the psychologist just to make sure. And that's something that I would like to encourage people who are doing, especially investigations in those kind of fields. Let's say war, riots, child abuse, things where you see that horrific content. Make sure that you check your mental health every now and then. Maybe read up on that blog. There are also some other parties that also wrote about it, but it's real. Getting traumatized by doing online investigations is real, and you could really, really burn out on that. You can even go as far as never being able to work again from that perspective. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Does this also include, for example, the desensitization of being in front of this kind of material?
Can you elaborate a little bit more about what you mean with that?
So, desensitization in terms of the fact that, like you said, you'd be watching these crazy videos or material while you'd be having lunch.
Yeah.
So does vicarious trauma also cover, for example, an individual being so desensitized to seeing this kind of material that they're not affected by it anymore? There's this mental gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where for example, I had former colleagues point out to me saying, Nico, I'm walking behind your office and you're eating your lunch while watching these things. That's not okay. That's not normal human behavior. Or I got so paranoid that I was out with my family in Amsterdam. I just, let's say, a advertisement screen fell over that made a loud bang, and I was like, okay, now it's going down. Now there's terrorist attack. So I started to become a little bit, let's say, edgy or too paranoid based upon the work. And that literally was for me the sign to take a step away and ask my leadership, hey, I need some time to unwind. I need maybe to be on a different unit for a couple of months just to get out of this state of mind, because you get numb. You get really numb. And this is why sometimes, Benjamin Strick, for example, Ben Brown on Twitter, he gave me, for example, a good say, hey, sometimes it's more easy to watch horrific content on a smaller mobile device outside in a park instead of behind a 32-inch full HD screen, because the way it now impacts you, because now you have the sounds of the outside basically filtering out a little bit of the horrific content compared to using in a closed office space and really entering your mind. So there are all little tips that can help you prevent from getting numb and traumatized.
That's really interesting. Now, I think that's something. I think that's something every investigator really does need to consider, isn't it? Mental health is something that I think until a couple of years ago wasn't really a thing, and I think it really should be more of a thing. Most people don't really respect it so much as saying, "Oh yeah, you're just weak" or whatever. But I think everyone has their strong points and everyone has their weak points, and there's no shame in addressing your mental health ever.
No, and also we all have biases and fallacies that we fall for, and if we combine that with being traumatized, for example, if you're looking into, let's say, the entire anti-vaccine world, you could also be sucked in and becoming detached from reality. And that, again, could be part of that mental health issue that you're running into, that you're probably not even aware of yourself because no one tells you. This is why you should always keep talking. And for me, that's hard nowadays because now I'm a one-man show. But when I was in law enforcement, I had the luck to talk with other people and other people taking care of each other. So I would always like to encourage people, if you're working in a team, keep talking to each other. Just every now and then, just grab a cup of coffee or tea and say, hey, how are you doing? Did you have any fun things in life? What are you going to do? What's your investigation about? Are you having any issues? How are you doing sleep-wise? Are you eating well? Are you staying healthy? Those little questions, just taking care of each other.
That human connection, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and we're only human in the end, right?
We're only human in the end. That's right. I mean, you could have said it better. Nico, it's really been an honor having you on a podcast, on our show. Let's talk again and make sure that we
my
keep
pleasure,
these connections alive. But I'm sure you won't be a stranger to us. And thank you very much. It's been a great time talking to you.
No, thank you. It was a great conversation. It really felt like a really relaxed conversation. So thank you so much for this. And thank you for giving me the platform on The Pivot to talk about my strange life and my strange world while having fun at it.
No, I wouldn't say it's much of a strange life or a strange world. I think one of the biggest things about The Pivot, something that I wanted to make sure was established is that this is not just something where we talk, but it's also something educational for people who are getting into OSINT, into investigations, into intel, whatever that may be. So having someone like you on this show really does create more of an impact. It makes sure that we can also get that extra reach to. It's not really about just the numbers. It's really about educating and what we can do to help people.
Always love to help. So if you want to have me back or just chat with me, well, you know how to find me. And if not, you can use a transform to find me. And always feel free to reach out.
I'm going to have to try that one time. Nico, you have a good day. Go get some ice cream. It's hot out there, right?
Yeah, same to you. And I think this year I will be in Munich teaching for SAN. So I'll most definitely reach out and we'll grab some dinner.
I'm going to get some beer for sure as well.
Okay, cool.
Lovely.
Cheers. Have a great day, man.
Bye-bye. Bye.